What did your partner say or do that made you realize that they were toxic as When I was 21, I had FWB. Eventually, she got a boyfriend, so we stopped, and that was that. Her relationship with him eventually deteriorated into an open one. To be honest, it was kind of her fault. She was a crappy person. So we started hooking up again every now and then. While we were friends, I was just an acquaintance of the boyfriend. It was messy and not the proudest thing I've done, and I feel bad for the guy. Eventually, my FWB found her now husband and dumped him. But hey, I was a 21-year-old hormonal dude. I learned from my mistake and moved on. Fast forward to my late 20s slash early 30s, and my girlfriend at the time happened to be a friend of my FWB. We had conversations and disclosed this when we started dating because she felt weird that I had hooked up with a friend of hers. I didn't know her at the time. I told her what it was, just FWB, not looking for her. Anything else. And that was that. Every now and then, she would find a reason to argue over something minor, but nothing escalated into big fights. 4 years into the relationship, we were eating pizza and watching a movie when she suddenly stared at me and said she couldn't believe I had slept with a girl who had a boyfriend. I was dumbfounded. It came out of nowhere. I asked what brought it up, and she kept insisting that I admit I was a bad person and an a-hole for something I had done 11 years earlier. I kept trying to talk to her and understand what was wrong, but she just kept insisting that she wanted me to admit it. Eventually, I did. I started crying and told her I was sorry for being a bad person, and from that point on, I genuinely believed I was a piece of garbage. For another year, she kept finding ways to bring that topic up and made me feel like crap, to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. We broke up. I needed 2 years of therapy just to convince myself I wasn't worthless. So, yeah, it took me a while to realize I was dating a toxic person. Story 2. The gaslighting was evil. My ex had health insurance and I didn't at the time. We had a newborn baby together, and his first doctor's appointment was coming up for his shots. Without insurance, newborn shots cost around $1,200 per visit, which neither of us had. I asked him if he'd sent in the paperwork to enroll our son in his plan, and he hadn't. I watched him fill out the application that same day, and watched him write a date a week earlier than that day, specifically. I asked him why he did that, and he said, "I'm doing this in case the application gets there past the due date. That way I can convince them it's the mail carrier's fault and that I did everything I was supposed to." We aren't together anymore. It was bad. Story 3. He criticized everybody. He was mean about his family, his friends, his colleagues. At first it seemed small. I knew he was depressed and naturally cynical with a low view of himself, but he'd laugh and joke with friends on the phone or in person for hours. Then, the minute they were gone, awful. I rationalized it for too long, then realized it would be the same about me. I convinced myself it wouldn't be because he always hyped me up until I heard it. He played the victim so well. Scary, really. Story 4. Far too many things, honestly. In fairness, I hold myself somewhat accountable because I knew she wasn't a saint and still chose to enter a relationship with her. She laughed at me when I told her I'd been essayed by a woman. I used to do martial arts a lot, and she'd make comments like, "Why are you working out? It's not like you're going to get any better." Or the classic, "Why do you care about looking healthy? You're already in a relationship with me." When I finally ended things, she was screaming down the phone, threatening to off herself. I told her that if that was the case, I was calling an ambulance because I wasn't equipped to handle that. After that, her family started giving me grief for making their daughter feel like a psychopath. Edit, I forgot one of the most unhinged parts. She accused me of cheating on her with my own cousin. She actually messaged my cousin and told her not to speak to me anymore or she'd have to discuss our relationship with our mothers. My mother was a very nasty woman herself, but even she had enough at that point. Story 5. She hit me after 2 months and I got a mark on my face. The next morning, all she said was, "But you're alive, aren't you?" Damn, if I had just left after that, I would have been golden. But we stayed together for another year. After that came the escalating chaos, her hurting herself, comparing me to her exes, secret chats with her exes, flirting with strangers on social media, compulsive lying, more hitting, grabbing the wheel and trying to run my car off the road, blocking, ignoring, breaking up 4 times a week, push/pull dynamics, and threatening false police reports. After that, I started recording our fights on my phone so that if anything escalated, she'd be the one in trouble. At the beginning, when she told me about all her toxic exes, I thought, oh, what a poor thing. I must be good to her. I was so naive. It took a long time for me to get away because I kept falling for the intimacy and the "I have changed" lines over and over. That relationship really changed something inside me. I don't look at things the way I did before, and I'm actually happy not to be such a hopeless romantic anymore. Story 6. My ex-girlfriend was drunk and introduced me to a female friend. During the introduction, instead of just saying our names, she mentioned that I had been cheated on by my ex-wife. It was something like, "This is my boyfriend. His wife cheated on him. Her friend had been cheated on in the past, and I guess we were supposed to bond over this exchange." I told her I didn't appreciate it and that it was very uncomfortable. She did it 2 more times. She used my ex cheating on me against me many times. I also caught her texting other men drunk at 1 a.m., and when I tried to set a boundary, she told me I hadn't gotten over what my ex did to me. Story 7. I was at a party with my ex-wife and someone brought out a newspaper with headlines about a local official being in an accident and being paralyzed. My ex-wife, without hesitation, said, "If that happened to my husband, I would be out of here." Story 8. We weren't living together, but he randomly cut me off for like a full week. Wouldn't answer my texts or anything. We were long distance, different colleges halfway across the country, so I couldn't, go check on him. Anyway, he finally comes back and tells me it was a punishment for not being interesting enough. He liked me because I was an intellectual who would have deep conversations, trademark, with him. And I'd been talking too much about things he didn't find interesting. I dumped him shortly after, and he acted like it came out of nowhere. Story 9, I was on her mate's privy story, and I noticed on her story my girlfriend, at the time, was cuddled up with some guy on the sofa. I messaged her and asked if we could FT just to see if it was her or not, and she said no, she was watching TV with her mom. I asked her to send me a photo. Kind of toxic, but after what I'd just seen, I'd say it's valid. And she called me toxic and blocked me. She messaged that night saying sorry, and I ended it with her same night. She still messages me sometimes now whenever her new talking stages don't work out. Story 10. It wasn't so much what he was saying, but the action he did about it. He used to tell me all the time that I should get contact lenses because he wanted to see what I looked like without glasses. I need glasses full time to see I have an extremely bad prescription and astigmatism. They're both very high and it's impossible to see without glasses. If I take my glasses off, I can't even find them. So I have to make sure I know eventually where I set them. One day out of town for a large event we had been planning to attend for over a year, he hid my glasses and acted like he couldn't find them. I had never had glasses just disappear. It might take me a while to find them, but if I have someone else around me, it's usually somewhere obvious. I figured, oh, that's okay. I have prescription sunglasses on me as well. I'll just wear sunglasses for the event. I asked him to pull them out of my bag. They were in a zip glasses case. I know for a fact they are in there because I switched them out after arriving to the hotel. He pulled out the case and tried to tell me they weren't in there, that I must have dropped them somewhere. I begged him to help me search the hotel. I called downstairs. I had staff members helping me search. I was in the lobby, on my hands and knees, feeling around trying to find them. He was busy getting ready upstairs and told me to just go to the event without them. I'll be fine. I absolutely refused to leave without my glasses. I told him to go have a good time, but I'm not leaving the hotel room and going into a crowded, strange place in a strange city being unable to see. Well, suddenly, right before we're about to leave, he pretends he found my glasses and they were just sitting on the bathroom counter the whole time, as if I didn't search every single image feel around every inch of that vanity. After some crying, he admitted that he hid both of my glasses because he just wanted me to see that it's not so bad, and that if I just go without them for a little while, my eyes will adjust and I'll be able to see fine. Story 11. Cheated on me with a Yankees player because I cheated on her first. How did I cheat? By going to her favorite burger spot without her while she was having sushi with her girlfriends. Found. Out she cheated with 3 other guys too. Story 12. This one is minor, but I had an ex who wanted to buy her daughter some new shoes. We were at an outlet mall and they had a BOGO sale. She found a cute pair for herself but was having trouble finding a pair for her daughter. I love being helpful and found a pair that fit her daughter's personality to a T, but she wouldn't buy them because they were $5 more expensive than the pair she was getting for herself. Both were combined under $50 and she wasn't hurting for cash. She just refused to spend more on her daughter than on herself out of principle. Story 13. She got mad at me for crying after a random guy in a store said I was ugly. She said I ruined the nice day we were having because I cried. Another time, she got mad because I tripped and fell on an escalator. I was already trying not to cry in front of our friends, and she got mad at me for that too. I'm a woman, so this wasn't even a sexist thing about men don't cry. She was just a D-head. She would also repeatedly call and text me if I didn't message back, but only when I had family visiting me or when I was visiting them. It was really weird. I don't think she thought it was a cheating thing, like it was literally with my sister. But my theory is she couldn't handle me being potentially closer to someone other than her. Story 14. Had a girlfriend who got mad at me and I had no idea why. For 3 days she would call, say nothing, and if I hung up, she would call back. I turned off my phone and she'd call my parents or show up at my house, in high school still living with my parents. This went on for 3 days. I basically didn't sleep. I was a senior and still in school. She had graduated the year before. On the third night, she yelled at me for keeping her up, and it was the end of the fight. The next day, I asked what I did. She said nothing. She was just angry and wanted to fight. Took me going to college and her finding some other poor sap to torture to finally get away from her. I was young and naive, and now know I should have involved a court order and police. It was hell. But from it, I ended up with my now wife, and without that hell, I would not be where I am today, which is something I would never change. Story 15. My ex often referred to other women as sluts for how they dressed and would think it was a compliment, stating he was glad I didn't dress like that, would also often tell me about how his mates would try and cheat on their girlfriends whilst they were all out drinking, but he would never do that. He cheated twice and only told me after I broke up with him. Story 16. Stuff got progressively worse over time, though one red flag stood out pretty early on already, but I was willing to endure it because I was hopeful and still in love, which didn't really change until the very end. Anyway, whenever he was doing stuff he criticized me for, I got really hurt. Obviously, things would get resolved only if I was the one who gave way, no matter whose fault it was. Then, at some point, I started asking him, when you do this, how am I to you? Am I not patient, forgiving, etc.? And he would answer, yes. Then I asked him, when I was especially hurt, why can't you for once bring forward what I show you when I make the same mistake? His answer would always be, well then don't slash. You don't have to slash, I still don't want to. It's crazy how blind you are. Story 17. She had just bought a new car and we were in Walmart getting oil for an oil change, but my phone couldn't connect to the internet, so I couldn't look up what type she needed as quickly. While browsing the book the store had, she got frustrated and shouted, "You're a man, you're supposed to know this stuff." I wasn't raised around cars, nor did I have the first clue about her new car. It felt very demoralizing and made me feel extremely small. Things just got worse from there. Story 18. She got mad at me because I kept being pulled aside by security while flying on a trip. We had just finished up an international trip and were flying home. For some reason, I was randomly selected for an intense screening and interview going through security. Was called after we got to the gate for a checked baggage search, and on our layover was pulled aside for another security interview. This was very bewildering to me, as by all accounts I am a very boring white guy and was dressed like a youth pastor about to lead a church weekend trip to the lake. My partner, meanwhile, kept getting more and more upset each time I was pulled aside, repeatedly asking me what I did and telling me how stupid I was. By the last time, she was literally screaming at me so loudly security showed up to ask what the problem was. I was completely confused about everything that was going on and realized her reaction was inappropriate and disproportional for the situation. I ended things when we got home. Story 19. He had been hanging out with his ex-girlfriend. When I found out and confronted him, he told me I was being crazy and that they're just in the same friend group. I felt bad and he gave me the cold shoulder. 2 weeks later, he told me they had hooked up Story 20, my ex, who I was with for 2 years too long. I would always come up with date ideas and pay for my own stuff always. He would either freeload or just not take me out. Don't know what I saw in him. This was at the end of the relationship. I was getting fed up with him. And at some point I asked him on the verge of frustration tears, "Can't you just take me on a date?" This little jerk responds, "Do you think you deserve it?" Told him instantly and calmly to get the hell out of my house. Story 21. There was the time she had a temper tantrum because I wasn't excited that her sister, who lived out of town and whom I barely knew, got pregnant, even though neither she nor her husband had finished school. Then there was the time her mother was diagnosed with a benign tumor. In true main character syndrome fashion, both my ex and her mother wanted an all-out pity party about the cancer diagnosis. I, having actually had cancer in the past, didn't get worked up about a benign tumor, so my ex threw a fit followed by a week of silent treatment. Finally, there was the time she cheated on me and blamed me for it because she was insanely jealous and simply assumed I had cheated on her. I never did, since I wasn't around her 24/7. Story 22. He said my life was perfect and that I was fine and comfortable because I get along with my mom and supposedly have nothing to worry about. This was while I was dealing with horribly painful surgical complications that cost me the best job I ever had, nearly offed me, and put me in and out of the hospital 16 more times over the next 10 months. Also, apparently it wasn't fair that I could take edibles and he couldn't, because he's an out-of-control alcoholic and addict, in and out of rehab just as often as I was in the hospital. And he was on parole too. So unfair. Story 23. She, an ex from a decade or so ago, told me she wasn't sure how much longer she could be with me because of all the arguments we were having. Arguments she started due to her own insecurities and jealousy, even though I was practically attached to her 24/7. We've talked randomly over the years, and she's admitted that herself. She at least understood how she messed it all up. I'd like to think she's learned from it, but I've seen her cheat, get cheated on, and overall have crappy relationships even to this day. So, yeah, I'm more inclined to blame her parents. They were absolutely toxic as hell, but stayed together for reasons I'll never understand. Grade A white trash. Story 24. She looked at me and said, "I think I want to fight." This was in the middle of a wonderful evening. She just wanted an argument. I kind of chuckled, and she stared at me stone-faced. I responded, "Oh, you're serious?" That led to an argument about how I supposedly don't consider her emotions. Took way too long to end that relationship. Story 25. My feet were killing me for quite a while, and anywhere I walked, they hurt so badly, like I'd walked 1,000 miles in my sleep. We were shopping for a housewarming gift at a mall, and I told him my feet hurt and that I needed to sit down. He said, "You need to walk more and get used to it, then it will stop hurting." I was literally in tears from the pain, and he left me standing there alone in the middle of the mall because he cannot stand how lazy I am. Years later, I was finally properly diagnosed with plantar fasciitis. Story 26. She told me I lacked ambition, even though I had a good job for a college student and was doing well in school. In response, I applied for my college's international exchange options to prove to myself and her I wasn't slacking. Got accepted for a semester abroad at a good school. She promptly dumped me after 2 years together because she didn't want to do long distance. Not only toxic and a bullet dodged on my end, but I actually met my wife while on that exchange. Funny how life works out sometimes. Story 27. With my ex, she used to guilt me every frigging Sunday into spending the entire day with her and her divorced mother. Every frigging Sunday. I missed out on so much time with my friends, who most have since moved away, simply because my ex would not could not understand that I did not actually need to spend every Sunday with her and her mom and B. I did not need to be there the entire day. Needless to say, she never agreed. Thank God I dodged that bullet and ended up meeting my wife about a year or so later, and sometimes wonder, after seeing how amazing my wife is, how I kept my head in the sand for so long. Story 28. First clue, her trail of burnt bridges and estranged family members. Secondly, her highly opinionated stance on everything. Don't agree with her? Then surely you're an idiot. And finally, just an overall mean way of communicating and interacting with others and behind their backs. Breaking up disappointed me incredibly, and I was certainly not perfect. But in hindsight, there was a lot of toxicity that caused plenty of red flags. Story 29. There is nothing that could ever possibly happen to you in a day I'd be interested to hear about. Then spent 30 minutes droning on about some boring commercial. Like I'm your life partner, and my day is so uninteresting. But that commercial is really worth the attention. He also feels conversations are just one person, him, talking. Anything outside of encouraging noises or "oh wow" is a rude interruption. My argument was that a conversation was 2 or more people saying things back and forth to each other, but he just thought that made me a horribly rude, selfish person. Story 30. Blamed me for every single health or behavioral issue that her puppy had, and punished me for it by not letting me take the dog out for walk/training/puppy class. Then had the audacity to tell me that I could take the puppy out whenever I wanted. I was just lazy. Conveniently forgets any examples I bring up of her blatantly denying me time with the dog, even if it had happened earlier that day. Constantly berating me for being a bad dog raiser, despite actively denying me opportunities to improve or even prove that I was improving. When we broke up, she accused me of never loving the dog in the first place, as if that made her behavior justifiable. Story 31. He was sitting across the room from me, using his computer. He was grinning. I laughed and asked, "What's so funny?" We had a similar sense of humor and often shared stuff that would make us laugh out loud. In this case, he got so annoyed and defensive and said he didn't laugh/smile/grin, and I'm just seeing things. Honestly, it wouldn't have been an issue if he just brushed it off and said nothing. Then I would have assumed it's something he doesn't want to share, and I would have let it go. It was his whole reaction and the way he gaslighted me that really made me realize he was toxic. Story 32. My ex-wife had COVID, and her 3 kids had COVID. I didn't. I was staying downstairs in the living room, and she had the bedroom. At the time, her kids were at their dad's house, who also had COVID. She made the decision to bring them back home, turning it into 4 people with COVID versus me. I had major anxiety about COVID at the time and was completely freaking out. The kids were in the next town over and were older teenagers. They were fine at their dad's. I asked her to please let them stay there since they all had COVID, but she refused and said, "I made the decision to compromise your health." They immediately started roaming around the house, and I had nowhere to hide, so I left and got a hotel room for 3 to 4 days until they went back to their dad's. That was devastating to me. She never apologized and defended her actions. It showed me how little I mattered. Story 33. That her ex-boyfriend still thought they were getting back together. A month into us spending almost every night together. We were from the same hometown but ended up working out of state. I saw that she had moved on social media and reached out so she would have some friends. We were both easy, so it was basically immediate overnights. We were having a BBQ with my friends when she said she had to take a phone call from her ex. When I talked to her afterward, trying to get some context, she said she had only told him they were breaking up because she was moving 1,500 miles away. And they had been together for over a year. He thought that was the only reason and relocated to the same state to try to make things work. She never told him differently. He still lives in that state, and it seems he's happy with where he is now, luckily. It turns out she had a habit of keeping guys on the sideline and cheating. She did the same to me. Luckily, it only lasted 3 months with her dragging it out and not ending things properly. I didn't put it together until I looked back with some clarity. Story 34. I had confessed to my ex-husband that I had experienced thoughts about self-harm in the past and how much that scared me, but that I had gotten through them. Fast forward to being married for about 5 months, and he got annoyed at me over something I don't even remember now. He said he was done with me and would decide whether he wanted a divorce. This was a tactic he used often. If he didn't like something, he would threaten divorce. I started crying, and he just looked at me and said, "You look pathetic when you cry. If you offed yourself right now, I wouldn't even care." The whole relationship was toxic, but that was such a low blow that I will remember it forever. Story 35. I went to pick my ex up from clubbing with her mate in town. After a 15-minute drive, I parked and saw her outside the club, just chatting away with her friend and a bunch of randos. For literally 45 minutes, I had ordered us food for when we got home. Needless to say, it was stone cold by the time we got back. She then got mad at me for not being happy about it and threw the burger at my head on the way out. Lol. I was fuming, but I also have to admit, I appreciate a good throw whenever it presents itself, because it beeped off the back of my head. Story 36. The constant verbal abuse is a pretty strong indicator. He tells me I don't help around the house, that I've brought nothing but destruction, that I don't contribute anything, that I'm selfish and unlovable, and he's always accusing me of cheating. I literally help with half of all the bills, spend half of my take-home pay on groceries, make elaborate dinners every night, and love his 2 kids like they're my own. But yeah, I suck. Lol. It's like he lives in a world where he wants me to be the bad guy. I just can't understand it. Story 37. When I found out he'd slept with someone he bumped into on a beach without using protection, he said, "I don't care if I die of some STD." I realized he didn't care that he might infect me and didn't care for me at all. I left at that point. Years later, I bumped into him, and he couldn't understand why I had left. Total clown. Story 38. I dated a guy for about 3 years, on and off. We broke up and got back together every other week. We were kind of a running joke. I guess I was equally as toxic in most people's eyes. Eventually, things just got so bad. One day, I was struggling with depression and anxiety and decided I needed to take a walk. My boyfriend called and said he wanted to take me out for lunch. I said I wasn't feeling it and just wanted to go for a stroll. He got mad and pulled the "oh great" routine. I said sorry, but I just wanted to be alone and that we could hang out again later in the week. He then said, "Well, I was planning on spending a lot of money on you today, but I guess you don't care." I replied, "Sorry, this isn't something I'm doing on purpose. I feel sad and I'm trying to manage my mental health. I want to be alone. Please respect that." This turned into a massive fight where he repeated variations of, "I guess I'm just not that important." This would have probably been the 20th time we broke up in 3 years, but this was when I knew, really knew, we needed to call it. For good. If you tell your partner you want to spend the day alone to think, relax, cry, and recharge, the only response should be, "Let me know how it goes, and let me know if you need anything. I'm always here for you." This was sort of the breaking point. We continued to date for about half a year after that, but the fights kept getting worse. Until one day, he sent me a picture of a pill bottle opened and spread across his bed with the caption, "You made me do this." Nope. That was the actual last straw. I told him to make my day and go ahead. I called him a piece of crap and said that anyone who dangles self-harm over someone's head to get what they want is insane, and that I was done for good. He tried to get back together with me a few times, but eventually he moved away. I'd say COVID hit a lot of people hard, but it kind of saved my life. We had our final fights right as the lockdowns were happening. We both lost our jobs in hospitality, and he couldn't afford to live in the city anymore. He moved back home with his parents on the other side of the country. Of course, he said he was moving away because there was no reason to stay anymore since the love of my life doesn't want me, which was BS. By that point, I was pretty numb. when someone threatens self-harm to make you care about them, pull the plug, pull all the plugs. Anything said after that, I was like, nah, I was immune. As a side note, we both ended up doing pretty well for ourselves after the breakup. Not great, but he runs a couple of businesses and I'm going to law school and running restaurants. I wish him all the best. And his next partner, all the luck. LOL. Story 39. She kept starting arguments with me, and even though I would be calm and reasonable, she would try to make me believe that I started the arguments and that I was acting irrationally. Thankfully, it was early in the relationship, so I noped out of there. Story 40. My ex actually called me the N-word when I was trying to suggest maybe we should spend some time apart. I pretty much knew right then and there, though I should have been more awake to the signs before. Still, it flipped a switch in my brain, and I'm glad it did. I got out of there. Lots of manipulative backtracking and fake apologies. She called me 66 times afterwards. Story 41. Kept making escalating jokes about how she tricked me into dating her while becoming more and more demeaning to service workers and strangers. More and more negative judgments of women we both knew. Called me a narcissist just like her dad when I pointed out that she was yelling at me for things I didn't do. Story 42. Ex-fiancé. I had gained about 10 pounds and was uncomfortable about it. It was a healthy weight gain. I had looked anorexic. He said, hey, get a haircut and you might not look so heavy. My naive 21-year-old self thought a new haircut might be a good idea, so I got one. Narcissists break you down, and you don't always realize when it's happening. His reply when he saw me? I was wrong. You look so much fatter. Everyone has been talking about how fat you are already. I completely woke up with that sentence. I'm grateful he said what he did. I saw him clearly and walked away that day. I'm grateful for it. Story 43, I asked her to stop lying to me. She said no. I asked her to let me lead the relationship. She said no. I asked her to communicate and be honest with me. She responded with silence. She lied and cheated on me and did whatever she wanted the entire time because it made her happy. Then she expected me to be there for her at her convenience. She has no values or morals. She used abortion as birth control. She has unhealed trauma from attempting to end her life. She follows other men without question or hesitation because she can't think for herself and is a people pleaser. She hops from one relationship to another as soon as she can. She doesn't know how to be happy by herself, so she will never be happy in a temporary relationship. She never compromised. It was only her way or nothing happened. She had so many red flags. I'm so glad I left. I can't believe I wasted my time on someone like that. Story 44. She was very hot and cold. Would tell me she was unsure about dating me because of her career and past relationships, but she would eventually call me back crying about how much she missed me and how I was like family. Eventually, it all ended because she told me that I wasn't doing things she wanted. And when I asked to elaborate on what things in the hopes to just have a normal, communicative conversation about it, she told me it's not the same if she has to tell me, and therefore it's ruined now. A slight argument started and now we no longer speak. Though I'm still broken up about the situation as time goes on, I feel like she had a lot of unresolved mental issues that were influencing her toxic behavior, and it's good that we're apart. Story 45. Set boundaries, and when they couldn't meet them, I tried to leave and got loved bombed so hard I basically had to disassociate to get out of it because I started to feel so guilty that I wouldn't give them another chance, but they had. Already wasted so many chances and I was tired. Story 46. Things could be going just fine, and then every 2 weeks she would have to find something to lose her mind about. Some people are just mentally unstable, whether they know it or not. That's not your problem, though. Leave them and don't feel guilty, especially if your child is being affected. Even more so if she literally says the child is the problem in the relationship. Story 47. This seems silly, but hear me out. He came over to my house when our relationship was extremely new and watched me throw day-old rice away that I had forgotten and left out. He literally ate it out of the trash can, and like the red flag was so big and I looked right past it, then he slowly started picking away at me and making me feel like I was stupid and ugly and was just very mean and uncaring. I have chronic pain and depression and anxiety, and this frigging raccoon told me I was keeping him from the life he's always wanted. Story 48. After telling her I enjoyed my hobby too much to give it up, and that I would only sell my collection in an emergency, Magic: The Gathering, I went to my buddy's hobby shop one night to play. She had known about this get-together for months. While I was there, she called and texted me constantly. After the 30th message asking if I was coming home yet, I had been there for no more than an hour. I told her my phone was going to die and that I was going to let it charge in my truck. Almost immediately after I went to put my phone on the charger, she called to say she had gotten into a car accident in our driveway. She rear-ended the garage. She then talked me into selling my collection to help pay for the repairs. Later, I found out the mechanic was a family friend, and had done all the work for free. I had no idea where the money I gave her went. Story 49. Every time I brought up any issue with our relationship, or if he'd hurt me, he'd flip it and start guilting me about the money he owed. He felt that was my fault. He bought a car he couldn't afford before he met me, but he always managed to shut down any form of conversation that way or by crying. Story 50. After I tried to end things with her, due to being overall suspicious / not emotional at all / and having a clear alcohol problem, she proceeded to bang one of my friends / old roommates who I knew for a while. Funny thing is, not only is he uglier than me, but he was also a jerk, so I got 2 crappy people out of my life for free at the price of 1. I just wish I could get revenge, because I'm over her. I'm just not over what they did to me. So I hope life comes back to hurt them terribly. Story 51. I have PTSD, and she went to my therapist behind my back and asked them to change my personality to their liking. My therapist refused, then she told me I should switch therapists. After we broke up, my therapist informed me about what she had asked her to do. My therapist didn't feel it was right to do so, while I was still involved in the relationship. Looking back, though, there were others. We were heading out to dinner, and I had a herniated disc and was in tremendous pain. I had to crouch down to relieve it, and some people passing by slowed down to look at us. It didn't bother me at all, but she said something like, "Get up, people are staring." To me, it looked like they were concerned, more concerned than she was actually. Story 52. Probably with my ex, we were arguing about something. I didn't want to be with him at the time, and he knew, but he would try to make me feel bad / guilty every time I told him the relationship isn't working. If I tried to leave my own home to get away, he would go as far as taking my keys / phone and even throwing my shoes / clothes up high so I couldn't get them. This particular time, he spat in his hands and rubbed it into his eyes and was pretending to cry. I, at the time, didn't realize they were fake tears and ended up apologizing for even suggesting breaking up. Not even 20 minutes later, after guilting me into intimacy I really didn't want. He thought it was so hilarious. He admitted to pretending to cry and laughed smugly about it that he won. I just lay there totally broken, feeling so trapped, like I was never going to be free from him. Story 53. After a very difficult time and following a mental health crisis that I had done my best to support her through, she said something like, "I'll have to burn this social circle. I've done it before. I can do it again." And it was in that moment I realized that what to me was a singular, momentous event was to her just a part of life. Make friends, have a breakdown, abuse those relationships, cut a dozen people out of your life to avoid having to be accountable for anything, and start over. So many things made sense in that moment. Story 54. The day my grandfather, who was practically like a parent to me, died, I told my partner I didn't want to see him that day because I wanted to grieve by myself / on the phone with my sister. He got into an argument with me because he thought I was being difficult, annoying, and not thinking right. He came over to my apartment anyways, even though I begged him not to and refused to apologize. The next day I called him to talk about going to the mass and he called me clingy. Severe emotional whiplash. I'm glad I dumped him. Story 55. She talks crap behind all her friends' backs. She even badmouthed my friend to her friends, right in front of him, about his mental illness. She's a disgusting person, and I can't believe I married her. We dated for 9 years and were married for 1. I gave her the house and walked the hell out of that nightmare. I also had to deal with her crackhead father. She loved enabling him. Story 56. I was with the woman I thought I was going to be with forever. She came from an abusive home with an estranged father, so I thought I needed to show her that I'd stick around. It was a real Sam and Diane situation. At one point, after years off and on, I asked her, "Sometimes, every once in a while, can we just ask each other, what can I do to love you better?" She said no. The final straw, after years of talking and me hoping she'd wisen up in her years, was right after a mentor of mine passed suddenly of cancer that he'd kept quiet about. I had just walked down to the mailbox to mail him a letter about how much he mattered to me as a mentor and how much I owed him for my career when I heard he passed. I was gutted. I called her, as she knew him too. It had been the first time I'd cried in years. Knowing I didn't mail it in time for him to read, she said, "Quit crying. It's not about you." To which, yes, I get it. I simply wanted to know how much I honor and respect him. And yet, also, mourning is for the living. Regardless, I was taken aback by her callousness. It was the last I've ever spoken to her. One of the best. One of the decisions I've ever made. Story 57. Ex-partner? He yelled at me in a full restaurant in front of his mom for not hearing what he said the first time. It should be noted I'm legitimately hard of hearing due to an accident. I was so embarrassed. I knew right then we'd be breaking up pretty soon. Story 58. We were at my brother's birthday party. He and his twin are 24, and she got way too drunk. She decided to insult me in front of my brothers, their girlfriends, and my brother's friends. When I tried to defend myself, she slapped me across the face and tried to throw a glass at me. The glass missed and shattered on a nice couple's meal at the table behind us. And somehow, we're still talking, for some reason. Story 59. On a date when we went to a concert, he ran into his ex, the one he'd dated directly before me, and sat out in front of the venue chatting with her for over an hour while completely ignoring me. It wasn't the first red flag, but it was definitely the last. If you're going to humiliate me in front of ex-partners and prioritize them over me, that's more than enough reason to let you go. Story 60. Someone I considered myself very good friends with completely dressed down a waitress for being disrespectful to her while we were out for another friend's birthday. The waitress literally did nothing wrong. The rest of us tipped extra and privately made sure the waitress was okay. Could never see that girl the same way after that, and we aren't friends anymore. Story 61. If I cried during an argument, he'd insult me and claim I'm trying to manipulate him into feeling bad for me. Obviously, it was all projection because he loved turning on the fake tears to get me to forgive him for hurting me. Story 62. My ex absolutely hated my dog. My dog is a giant baby, a Great Dane, who wouldn't hurt a soul unless his mama was in danger. One sentence from my ex that I will never forget was said while he pointed at my dog. I cannot wait until the day he dies. Story 63. He read one of my old journals while I was drunk, then woke me up the next morning screaming at me for having a journal that mentioned crushes I'd had before our relationship. That probably wasn't the first time I realized he was controlling, but it was definitely the beginning of the end. Story 64. They used to make negative comments about my body, telling me I had no ass, no boobs, etc. And when I cried and said it hurt my feelings, they would say I needed to learn to take a joke. Then one day, I made a small dong joke about him, and he became livid, absolutely fuming, furious, red in the face. When I pointed out that he makes jokes about my body, so he should be able to take jokes about his, he said, well, you know how bad it feels when I make those jokes about you, so why would you make those jokes about me and try to make me feel bad? The mental gymnastics were so insane that I finally realized this person wasn't operating on logic. Story 65. When we were working on something together for her business that she needed help with, we were having a good time. We went through a few ideas until she said, cute, I love it. So we moved on. Fast forward to the very next morning, where she suddenly and completely out of blue raises her voice and says to me, referring to what we worked on the day before, why would you make it like this? I didn't want it like this. I would have never wanted this way. You don't listen. You never listen. And proceeded to berate me. It was then I was like, whoa, this is not normal behavior. Unfortunately, this was the first of many experiences before I finally decided to cut her off from my life. Story 66. I broke it off with her after she showed many signs of inappropriate behavior. The last straw was her not showing up for a weekend we had planned together. I called her, and she was drunk in a hot tub with several guys. Later on, she just couldn't believe that I could break it off. Apparently, that didn't happen to her. Story 67. It's been about a month since the breakup, and I'm remembering so many of these moments now. Here's one that stood out toward the end. We were fighting. He messed up in a major way. And instead of talking and communicating properly, he called his mom and put her on the phone to apologize for him. He's 34. Story 68. It was either, I don't want you to say anything to anyone. I would hate for the constant to learn children what you have done to me. Or she told me she didn't ever love me, that she just really wanted to be married and have a family, and I seemed good enough. This was after 18 years together, 2 kids and I presented her with evidence I knew she was having an affair with her coworker. Story 69. I hit a deer on my way to work. I worked nights, so it was probably around midnight when it happened. I wasn't hurt and the car was damaged, but not too bad. I was shaken up though, so I did what I assume anyone would do and called my partner, even though he would be in bed. My bad. His response, next time, don't call me unless you're hurt. That was just the first incident I can remember. Another was when the company I worked for was in a labor dispute. I was on strike and was walking the picket line on the overnight shift. The next day, we had a wedding to go to. I had been awake for 24 hours at this point, but he really wanted me to go to this wedding with him. About 2 hours into the reception, I said I was tired and was going home. He was more than welcome to stay if he wished, and I would pick him up after the reception, but I really needed some sleep. His response was to tell me to suck it up. I left, and he ended up sleeping on an air mattress in a very nice, heated garage. The final straw, though, that was when he hid in the upstairs bedroom while someone was trying to break into the house at 2 a.m. while me and the dog were downstairs trying to get them to go away. Thankfully, the dog wasn't small, and neither was her bark, so they decided against pursuing their endeavor. I never could look at him the same after that. Story 70. This may sound silly for non-sports fans. I love soccer. It means a lot to me. My club and my country. The World Cup is the ultimate stage for me. I knew for the 2014 World Cup I went to watch parties alone as it wasn't her thing. That is fine. But then, the United States failed in disastrous fashion to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. I was hollow and gutted, the lowest I've ever felt after a sporting result. When I explained it, she was happy, saying, "Good, I won't have to hear about stupid soccer." I felt so alone that she never took an interest but mocked something that means so much to me. It brought a lot of patterns of cruelty and selfishness into focus, and she left me shortly after refusing to even try to work on communication and salvage the relationship. Story 71. Me and my girlfriend broke up today. I don't even know what to do at the moment. All I know is I made some dumb mistakes in the relationship. You have one life, folks. Don't waste it being self-centered. Live it with someone who you can call your best friend. And don't take that for granted. Story 72. She yelled at me a lot over nothing, and anytime I showed any reaction to it, she called me mentally ill. She was leaving once and I asked her where she was going, and she told me I was kidnapping, or falsely imprisoning her by asking. She once told me she only used intimacy to get what she wanted out of life. She body shamed me when I got injured and put on weight. We were together for 16 years. Before I was able to move out of our marital home and cut her off, she started relationships with multiple men and contracted herpes. She tried to blame me for it. She filed multiple false allegations years after the fact in an attempt to get restraining orders to make it complicated. For me to visit my children as we have 3 together. She cyberstalks me and has repeatedly attempted to get me thrown out of my living arrangement by sabotaging my character and narcissistic triangulation attempts with mutual contacts. When I got sober and started attending therapy, she tried to have me arrested on false domestic violence claims that were thrown out within 5 minutes in court. She is a borderline groomer, works in an industry that is borderline human trafficking, and is the most deceitful, manipulative person I've ever known. I have lived with self-harm ideation and depression since we split, and I am horrified of what the future holds for my children, as I am in such a state I cannot litigate well. And I do not want my children to lose the safety and security of the $1 million beach house I worked for the entirety of my professional career to afford for them. All I can pray is that justice and karma will sort out the issues at hand. I've since retired myself, to my sadness, and I just roam the earth. I hit an NA meeting now and then, had an abusive rebound, and have lost considerable weight and aged rapidly. I sought out death for a long while before I forced myself out of my line of work. Love shouldn't be directed at people, it should be directed to God, and whatever comes of it should be enough if you are humble. I hope death frees me of the pain I live with every day now. I have been thinking about moving back to Juarez or Detroit to seek my end. I live in a very safe, high cost of living area of the world, and the thought of living another 40 years is horrifying. Story 73. I mean, there were many, so many, but the one that hit the hardest was when he said, on our 2-year wedding anniversary, "I deserve to bang other women." Anyway, we divorced in 2018. He's moving in with his dad soon and can't drive or get a job. Story 74. When I got mad at people, I used to have a habit of giving them the silent treatment as a way of punishing them. In reality, it was a stupidly cowardly way to handle anything, and also pretty abusive. For me, it was learned behavior from my childhood. Anytime I got bad grades or did something wrong, my parents would beat me and then give me the silent treatment for weeks or even months. Needless to say, it took years of therapy to correct this behavior. Story 75. My mother died while my then-girlfriend and I were on vacation. When I finally got home, my ex-girlfriend, from a year ago who was very close to my mom and sisters, came over and dropped off food. My then-girlfriend came up and made her cry. When I told her off, she told me that I hadn't given her enough attention in the past 3 days after my mom died. I then told her to get the fuck out of my house. She started chugging the bottle of goose thinking I would tell her she couldn't drive. I then grabbed the bottle and ran out of the back door where she followed me. I then ran in the front, locked the door, and ran as fast as possible to lock the back. She was banging on my door for hours, but I just put my bows on and fell asleep. The next week, I asked for my stuff back from her house. She dropped it all in the parking lot of my work. A week after, my mom died. Some people are whack. Story 76. She, my ex, told me that men in a relationship can't be friends with women. I had, and still do have, several amazing friends who are women, and our relationships are, and always have been, purely platonic. My ex insisted that I stop being friends with them or she would leave me. This was 6 months into the relationship, so it's not like she was unaware of my friendships. I ended it with her that evening after she went nuclear in response to me telling her there was no way I would do that. She claimed that she didn't understand how she wasn't enough for me and why I needed other women in my life. It was the most surreal and frustrating argument I've ever had. Hopefully, anyone reading this who is experiencing something similar will realize that this behavior is not acceptable and find a way to end that relationship. I can only imagine what else I would have gone through if I hadn't ended things then and there. Story 77. I was vulnerable with him about my, admittedly, at the time and most times, who am I kidding, fragile mental state. He said, "Would it be easier for me if you weren't sad all the time?" Yeah, of course it would be. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I remember, but I was deeply hurt by that response. Of course, it came coupled with other careless and negligible behavior, but that one cut like a knife. It was a lesson. You need to be careful who you open up to. Just another thing to be disciplined about, unfortunately. Emotional immaturity runs rampant among the crowds. Story 78. She didn't want to make an effort to hang out. I guess she thought offering a 30-minute hangout squeezed in between her time with groups of friends counted as putting in effort. I don't know. I responded. Not meanly, but I called her out on how awful that kind of offer was. I felt a bit toxic afterward, but my trusty coworker assured me I said more than I needed to, because silence would have been better. Definitely more than she deserved, and I was probably too nice in parts, but I didn't say anything out of bounds. My coworker said she was proud I stood up for myself. I'm still kicking myself for it, but it's a good lesson. I know myself better now and have a clear idea of how I want to handle things in the future. So, I guess that's a plus. Story 79. Haha, that's not happening. This is what one of my exes said that made me realize he'd been getting progressively more controlling and possessive for a while. The context? My best friend of my whole life had invited us to her town for Halloween weekend, and I asked him if he wanted to go. He said no, so I said that was fine, and I just go by myself. He chuckled and said the above. In that moment, it became super clear to me that he was completely confident in his power over me, that he got to call the shots, and what I wanted or needed wasn't even a consideration. Suddenly, it was so apparent that I had become pretty isolated from my friends and family to appease him and his insecurities. And it was like the spell was broken in an instant. Anyway, you were a super crappy boyfriend, see. Suck an egg forever. Story 80. I had just come off a terrible depressive episode and was also physically very ill, and I didn't think I could make it to the doctor on my own. Going to the doctor is difficult under the best circumstances because of my medical anxiety. I needed him to come with me or take me. He said he would, but only if he could spend more time at the gym that weekend on our only day off together. He went for 2 hours a day. Story 81. I told him that I didn't know I was pregnant, and I had found out when I had a miscarriage. It was really traumatizing and difficult. He accused me of lying and or it being someone else's, or that I knew I was pregnant and did it to myself. Story 82. She couldn't stop talking about how abusive all of her past partners were. She didn't have any friends who knew her exes, and her family, despite appearing happy and cohesive on social media, wanted nothing to do with her. She was a real Darvo queen. Story 83. He used to say his dream was to have multiple wives/girlfriends and like a little community, him and all his partners with all their kids. He idealized people for status first, then personality later. I found out on the first night I met him, his ex was a doctor with rich parents, etc. Only months later did I ever found out that they even got along. Yes, she was a great girl. When he fell for another girl, the first words about her was that her dad was a stockbroker who'd just bought a boat and he could see himself on that boat. He used to panic when I was around men, even when we were just friends. Believed men and women are biologically different, and men are wired to be with multiple people. A few things of many red flags. Story 84, I kept getting stabbed with his insulin needles. He just leaves them unsheathed everywhere, and then tells me to get over it because he has diabetes. He doesn't brush his teeth because he has diabetes. Doesn't even wash his face in the morning. Haha, probably because diabetes. Mind you, I've had good friends with type 1, so I know none of that is normal. My dad's an insulin-dependent type 2, so I know damn well how to manage diabetes and dispose of needles safely. He doesn't want to do any of it. I'm leaving him. Oh, and he drives like a reckless bish, too. Story 85. Whenever I felt sad, stressed, or frustrated, emotions he saw as negative but are completely normal to feel, he would tell me to stop. His favorite song was Don't Worry, Be Happy, and he took that message way too literally. When he felt sad, stressed, or frustrated, he would listen to the song on repeat. He didn't want anyone to feel these negative emotions. Ultimately, he was never able to process them himself, and he didn't allow others to process them either. Story 86. My ex had some childhood traumas that he did not want to talk about, but he would blame me for doing something that triggered him. He also told me that if I asked him about it at the right moment, he would talk about it. The problem was he wouldn't tell me what the right moment was and insisted I shouldn't ask at the wrong moment because that would make him feel depressed. Then, when I didn't ask at the right moment, I got blamed for letting it pass. Story 87. During a discussion about public breastfeeding, he said, "You're my wife and you will not do that. If that means you don't leave the house until the baby is older, okay. Your chesticles do not need to be on display." I was floored. The fact that this man praised me, borderline worshipped the ground I walked on, loved that I was carefree, a wildling. He was coldly telling me that because I was his wife, I wasn't allowed to do something perfectly normal and legal, and the one that will never leave me. I'm stone sober, after putting his hands on me while I begged him to stop because he was scaring me and drunk. My therapist is well paid. Story 88. As for my most recent relationship, after I confessed, I realized I couldn't really feel any connection toward her. I have a really hard time experiencing good emotions, almost impossible. She shared my explicit pictures around her school, lesson learned, and drove to random places to make it look like she was hooking up with multiple people, one right after another. I saw this on the Snapchat map. Although I cannot confirm if she actually slept with other people, that's what it looked like. Later, I found out a buddy of mine dated her. If I'd known sooner, I wouldn't have been in a relationship with her. She cheated on her boyfriend with me, which I can't really blame her for. He showed no interest in her despite being together. He only gave her attention when he was in the mood, usually at night, often bragging about how big his package was. The only thing I regret is being too stressed to perform when she attempted to cheat and sending explicit pictures. At least I got some back, so it's not a total loss. Story 89. My ex tried to get me to drop out of grad school because he couldn't hack it. He said I was stupid, even though he couldn't actually handle it himself. And I could. I dumped him when I realized he was gaslighting me. I'd been too permissive and too kind to him, but it made me realize I should never, ever put up with anyone treating me like that. He's a bastard, but I went on to complete my studies, build a fantastic career, earn further qualifications, and enjoy a wonderful life with my husband. Meanwhile, my ex has to remain himself. A bitter, pathetic twit. Karma, bish. It works like a charm. Live well, friends. That's the best revenge and the best medicine. Story 90. He's done other bad things that were way worse, but the last straw was when he said, "You deserved everything that's ever happened to you." During an argument we were having, he didn't let me off easy when I called him a few months later and told him, "I'm breaking up with you." He hung up, and 5 minutes later, he sent a photo of him on the brink of tears to me on Instagram with the caption, "Is this really what you want?" Pretty wild. Story 91. I moved to a whole new country for him, gave up my high-paying job, learned a new language, and took care of his 2 boys when his ex-wife decided she didn't want them after all. I was 25. He was 20 years older. So, when out of anger, he said, "You know what? You can F off. I'll throw you back to where you came from," which was LA, by the way. I couldn't let it go that the thought had even entered his head. Never mind that he could say it to me. For what, you might ask? His 11-year-old was grounded because he took heroin-laced E at a party. My ex wasn't sticking to the grounding, and I said, "Baby, please, we have to stick to it. His mom goes easy on him. Yeah, but we can't because I'm so scared of what will happen if we don't rein him in now." He got angry and defensive. He said I wasn't the kid's mom and to never speak about his son like that. I get it. He was already towing the line, not wanting his son to prefer an easygoing mom over him. But I was genuinely afraid for the little guy. All I could do at first was cry. Then I talked back, basically saying, "It's like you're siding with his mom. I thought we were on the same page. How dare you speak to me like that, after everything I try to embrace and do for you?" That spurred him on, but I felt it. Needed to be said. Maybe I shouldn't have put it in his face that I'd done so much for him. When does that ever help? So he went on a rant about how I don't know half the things he's dealing with because he shelters me, called me a spoiled little princess, and eventually said that. Edit. I'm adding this because I don't want to be unfair to him. Of course, he apologized. He soothed me. It was flowers, hugs, and kisses for the entire week. Then he snapped again because stress does that and said the same thing. That's when it really hit me. It felt like somewhere in his head, I was inferior, disposable, a throwaway. Even if he didn't consciously believe it, it lived there anyway. To be fair, he did try to make it up to me, he really did. But in the end, it all caught up with him. His ex had put him in severe debt because he was the one with the prestigious job, even though she was the one who primarily racked up their credit cards. The companies went after him. He was still paying her child support despite the kids living with us and only seeing her 1 weekend a month. He couldn't bring himself to change the agreement or go through her BS again. There was just too much on him in the end. And I guess it didn't matter how loved he was or how hard we worked on things. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.